Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the third night of FREEFEST. My name is Siobhan Sung, and I am a co-founder of Flypaper. And on behalf of my other co-founder, Ross Dia, we welcome you and thank you humbly for joining us for the panel I Am, a panel focusing on how Black women engender agency and authenticity through cultural and community lenses. Tonight's panel will be led by a dear friend and former collaborator and incredible woman, Jennifer Newman. We welcome you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Siobhan. It's so great to be with you again tonight. It's been a while since we've shared space, so it's so great to be here. Thanks for having me. Thank you, Russ, for having me tonight and moderating an incredible group of women artists, Black women artists. I'm really excited to share their work with you tonight. I currently the Associate Artistic Director at the Yale Schwarzman Center, a brand new center for student life and the arts. We'll be opening our doors this September. I'm also a choreographer and performer and educator as well. So with that, I want to introduce our first guest. I'm going to bring on Jocelyn. Jocelyn M. Goode.
Yes, I'm Jocelyn Marie. Thank you for having me. And I guess I'll say a little bit about myself. I am an artist, a designer, and educator, and most recently, the founder of the nation's first African American Roller Skate Museum. So it is such a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to this lively dialogue.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm so excited to hear more about how your practice has manifested itself into the Roller Skating Museum. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and bring on our next guest. This will be Anaiis Cisco. Hi, Anaiis. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Anaiis Cisco, a filmmaker from Brooklyn, New York, and a professor at Smith College. Thank you for having me here.
Yes, wonderful. And you are a collaborator with our next guest also, and we will also talk about your work together as well as your work separately. Our next guest is the soprano, Kelly Griffin.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm Kelly Griffin. I am a soprano. I'm a classical singer living here in New York City. Happy to be here. Thank you.
And as I navigate the buttons. Okay, so our fourth guest, we're also going to share some work by our fourth guest, which we'll start the evening off with. But first, let me introduce Bryöna DeGraff. Bryöna, come to the screen. And if you want to say a little bit about yourself. Hi.
Hi, my name is Bryöna. I'm 23. I'm from New York City. I'm an artist of all sorts. I'm really happy to be here. So hi.
Great. Do you want to give a little introduction to the film we're going to see?
Yeah, so last year I did an internship with RealWorks, and we were instructed to write a poem about I am. That was our prompt. And this is what I created. It was my first time making a short film. It has been something I've always wanted to do. So yeah, this is what I created to say about who I am as an artist and as a being.
Fantastic. So I know we'll get into what we'll do is we'll watch it. We'll allow our panelists to give to respond to what they've seen, because this will be their first time seeing it. And also for those who are watching us live, please feel free to put any questions into the chat and we will address those questions too. So let's start with I Am.
I am windows reflecting sunlight, dancing trees to wind's music, clear and resonant thoughts, youthful laughing of sweet babies. I am a mother being greeted by her loving family, smooth R&B, really rough rap, black bodies all in one tune saying, I love me. Standing clear of closing doors. I am hugging a friend seen by surprise, closing it in. For the night, finally being alone. The spark of a tightly rolled J, lace bras and silk panties, Nag Champa and Palo Santo, grunting turn of boiling water, rain's wetness sleeping on the flowers. I am corks pulled out of red bottles, yes, wine, fluttering of a fairy's wings, roots of an elder tree, grandma's kiss, held in my hand until sweaty. I keep there for us to remember I am loved. Just because I am who I will be, I've been becoming. I am the spectrum and the extremes, polarity, duality, and oh, the oneness of being. I worry, I make nonsense, yet I appreciate the cacophony of my mind. I am the nine. I am the whole. I am the all. I am the void, the nothing.
Wow, I love this so much. Yeah, so good, so great. Yeah, Bryöna, why don't I'm going to go ahead and open this up. I mean, there's things that are like that pop out for me that I'd love to ask about. Maybe I'll start with one question and then we can open it up to this panel also just to respond. One thing that, I mean, there's so many things, the layering that you're using, the layering of voices, the layering of bodies, the movement that you have in there, the responses. The language you're using is so beautiful. One thing that struck me is toward the end where you bring us from the cacophony, the whole, to the nothing. And I'm really interested about the nothing and what that means for you. If you could speak about the nothing.
I guess it's a complicated idea, but I don't know. It's something I tell myself. I am everything and nothing. When I think about like existence and like we're all here having a virtual conversation about art, and it's so like weird to exist. I try to imagine a time before time before time before time, like the essence of creation, and that's nothing. And there's some freedom in that, I think, for me. Um, like how everything is seemingly so meaningful, but also so meaningless. I am everything and I am nothing. So that's, I guess, what I meant by that. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Does anyone here want to go ahead and just jump in with a question or a response right away? I'm happy to call somebody, but go ahead, Jocelyn. You're muted, though.
Jocelyn's muted.
I was saying that I thought it was really lovely. It felt textural, even though I was seeing it with my eyes, especially the part about your grandmother's hands in your hair and the way you touch that flower. That was like a moment for me. I also love the play of the audio and the different intonations, and even like this baritone voice that came, and I was like, oh, what's that? You know, it was a layer of mystery or intrigue for me. And I wonder if there was an intent behind that, or if it signifies or symbolizes something, or if it was just an artistic touch.
It was definitely an artistic touch, but I think that it speaks to the texture and also the sensuality of living. I think of like, everything is very physical for me, how I feel, how the air smells, like how it feels, just all my senses, what things sound like. I'm very affected by those things. And I had help with this project. I did not do this alone. This was my first time learning like how to use a MacBook, how to create, and I had like people who are very audio or auditory, just well equipped with music and GarageBand. So that even speaks to community, just having help. So yeah.
Nice.
I love that also, that
Thank you.
Speaking to asking for help, that's a thing one can do. We often think that we have to be able to do everything by ourselves, and And then just that, you know, that's a freedom also, the freedom to be able to ask for help. As you talked about, the nothing is a freedom. And I love that idea because it plays for me too with this idea of getting the freedom of choice to perform or to not perform. That's like a theme that I'm always very interested in, is how we get to choose performance or non-performance, and that sort of the right to not perform also, especially as Black women. You know, I think it's a very strong opportunity. So I'm so happy to hear that was coming through for you too, and you're making the work. Anaiis or Kelly, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, definitely. Bryöna, thank you for sharing this beautiful work with us and for completing such a layered, intimate film. It feels like a free write for the self of you connected to nature, spirituality, the physical, the metaphysical, and just exploring that. It was like a exploration through your mind or your sensorial embodied experience that we get to encounter. And I love the use of the music and how it has some African roots to some of the drums that we're hearing, but also like a contemporary edge to it as well. And I also support many of the students that move through RealWorks as a narrative lab mentor. So to see an intern who's also a part of the RealWorks community still have the opportunity to produce work is really powerful. And I'm excited to be a part of the organization and now to learn about your work. And I want to share your work even with my mentee now, who just finished her first film, who's 15 making film. So RealWorks is like that space, but I'm glad that you also found community and a place that you're able to find your voice or explore your voice through moving images and sound design.
Yes, I love that we're lifting up RealWorks. Yeah, so I was gonna say, go ahead and talk about RealWorks.
Yeah, they definitely, it's interesting because like, this was a project I wanted to work on without the words. I didn't have the words to say like, oh, I want to make a I am visual about myself, but they provided the platform and the opportunity for me to like create something that's like long term, like long years after going through the program. I will always remember my first, you know, poetic visual and like how that felt to express that. So I'm just grateful that we had the space to come together to do that, to be supported, to be affirmed as an artist. Yeah, definitely important.
That makes me think of Kelly. Yeah, Kelly, go ahead. I saw you were going to start. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Bryöna, for sharing this with us. It was just so incredibly beautiful. And to know that this was your first time doing something like this, I'm really blown away. I was thinking about, you know, not just being a Black artist, but also this situation that the whole world is in the middle of or coming out of through this pandemic. And I was seeing it as Jennifer talking about going into nothingness, how it really echoes a lot of what I was feeling, what a lot of us were feeling, I think, during that time. But to see it in this very New York kind of way, I don't know, it was just very beautiful. And I think people will respond to this on a number of levels. So thank you for bringing that art into being, because I think it's so important.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that.
I wish we were able to show more of everybody's work that's on the panel today, because everyone has such interesting and practices that actually speak to one another. So I feel like there's so many overlaps. I understand why we're all together in this panel, but sadly, I want everyone who's watching at home to make sure you go and you find everybody's work online and you can go dig in, because it's all really, there's really incredible work that is totally spiraling here around what you just saw with Bryöna's work. So with that, maybe I'll start with Jocelyn. I'd love to hear a little bit about your work, especially, you know, as we talk about embodied community and the museum, the African American Museum of Roller Skating. When I think of embodied community, embodied history, how that lives in that space of people skating together. So could you give us a little info on that?
Yeah, sure. I think first and foremost, creating the African American Roller Skate Museum was about finding harmony within myself, and all the different things I'm interested in, and being at a turning point in my career where I was unhappy, but I wanted to recapture the love and just feeling uncertain. And so what happened, the pandemic was a moment of pause, to say the least. And, I had been a painter for over 20 years. So that's 2/3 of my life at this point. And had just reached a place where money and creativity, like the money part was working and it was just killing the joy and the creativity. And I just wanted to do something else. And I didn't know really how I was going to manifest that, but I ended up going skating with a friend in December. And for the first time in the whole year of 2020, I saw Black people happy. They were skating, they were distant, but they were in motion. The music was that soul music, that timeless music. And it was just so much happiness. And I was like, wow, I need more of this, and a lot of my other outlets, I love to dance, all that stuff was shut down. So, I just basically found myself feeling like that spark, like when you fall in love with someone, like, that initial moment when that love gets created in your heart, that's what I felt. And I was like, how can I make this part of my life, And so I started researching and came across a lot of issues that the Black community was expressing, particularly with not being recognized for their contributions to roller skating, and the media accrediting this quote unquote revival in roller skating that happened during the pandemic as people turned to it as an alternative to white people, to white skaters, to blonde women, really emphasizing and giving them credit. And so, my background also includes being a community organizer and using art and culture as tools for social progress. So that just all kind of reignited within me. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to make a museum because we need our own institution. And as much as I see expressions like protesting as part of the way that we express ourselves, I also feel like agency is important. And I don't expect anyone who is harming us, our oppressors, to just all of a sudden decide not to do that because we're mad and in the streets. I think it's up to us as leaders to actually enact solutions that, the rest of us can be a part of and that we can create allies and coalition. So creating the museum was really about merging so many things I'm interested in, because a museum does everything, artistically, performance-wise, educationally, serving the community. And yet there's so much space to invent and to be inclusive. So it was like finding something that I loved, not feeling that for a while, and then figuring out that I could find unity within myself by uniting these things, as well as uniting my community around something that was so intrinsic to the culture. So I guess that's a long answer, but that's the honest motivation.
I love that, because what it sounds like, this idea of getting re-inspired, right? So inspiration, how there's times when it's like you just need to find, you go into that valley and you need to find that inspiration again. And
can we talk about that a little bit? Because I feel like inspiration is something that I think when you're a creative, you might put a pressure on yourself or feel like unhappy because you're not inspired or not producing. And I think of inspiration kind of like a surfer, and you're waiting for that wave, and surfers, they know there isn't always going to be a wave. And I think just waiting for that wave to come in, because once it comes, you ride it all the way until it's no more. And I think finding also that patience about that moment to arrive where you really do feel inspired, I think is also part of that, kind of like the duality of being everything, as we were speaking about Bryöna's film, being everything and then being nothing. It's like you have to accept both sides of the process. And I think even that lesson was very, very important.
Absolutely. I mean, that's like the yin yang, right? It's like you have to have both. They both exist, and they're just constantly working together. And patience is not a virtue I possess, admittedly, but I know that it is so valuable. And I'm so interested about how this manifestation, the history of your work, your 20-year career, and then how it's now, how you see it going from maybe 2-dimensional painting to 3-dimensional space, people, bodies, moving, sound, food, I'm sure,
Yeah, I think at this point, the goal is really to push roller skating culture as it's being curated through the lens of the Black experience, to push it into the mainstream by combining it with art, with music, with fashion, with dance, to creating opportunities for African-American skaters to be recognized, to be rewarded, and also to educate. There's a lot of people who want to learn how to skate, and also a lot of people who enjoy our culture. So it's really about that authorship and that advancing of the culture that I'm really interested in, and just having a digital space. One question I often get is, where is the museum? And, the artist within me just loves that question and also kind of resents that question, because it just shows that people are so conditioned to think of things in very literal ways. And for me, I'm about deconstructing what systems, and saying, well, we can reinvent these as we take ownership of them, and looking at the times that we live in, and looking at what the pandemic taught us, that you don't have to have a building to have cultural production. And I didn't see it as an advantage to pursue all my efforts and energy into trying to acquire a physical location and raising capital and dealing with administrative costs and overhead. I felt like the emphasis is on collaboration, on executing ideas, on finding partnerships. And so this museum, it launched in April. It exists as virtual and online content, as well as through pop-up and customized activations and events that can happen anywhere, and I think there's a real beauty and a real strength in being a museum that operates in this shape-shifting sort of way.
A museum as concept, right? It's like and it can move. I love that.
I mean, because as a museum, it's not the building, it's the contents, it's what's happening in the building. So, as much as people would think, oh, I want to go to this museum, I also look at the museums that exist as focusing on things that have died, celebrating artists and creators after they've passed away, things that are extinct, things that are artifact. And roller skating culture and Black culture is alive and thriving. So this idea of trying to get a permanent institution with walls to contain and house the culture, I don't feel like that's necessary at this point. I think there will arrive a time where we'll want to have more production space. But even in the future, I envision this museum existing as chapters, where there's regional versions of it, and the people in those places can create and curate according to their wishes and their needs. So I'm also, as much as I'm looking to, be creative and represent Black roller skate culture, I'm also looking to challenge how a museum functions and operates within society.
Bravo. Yeah, it's amazing. That's so great. I want to go back to inspiration and this idea, because something that you said, Jocelyn, I feel like Anaiis could speak to in the multiple films that I've seen that you've made. Each one has a very clear and specific, when I watched them, felt like there was a specific, for lack of a better word, thing that you were responding to, that you were searching, that you were trying to answer, that you were really trying to dig into. And each one is so clear and specific. So I wonder if you could talk about inspiration for yourself and where you find it, when do you respond to it, and when do you know it's going to be a film?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know that I approach my filmmaking and thinking about what inspires me more so than I think about what can heal me. And so the things that I'm exploring in the first few films that I made were what it is to just be Black and in the gray area, not necessarily the Black or the white, but like to be in between, to move through space in the in between. And all of the films take place in New York City, but there's a certain quietness that is important to the piece, that there's not loud music, not loud chaos that we're all familiar with, but more so the inner worlds of these characters and their respective communities. And so with the first film that I made, Breathless, I knew that I wanted to talk about police brutality because I was experiencing stop and frisk at a very prominent time during like 2010 to 2015, where I was being followed home by police and stopped. And so I wanted to explore that in the film, in my first film that I was making in film school. And at that time, I met this incredible woman, Yvonne Welbin, who is the head of Sisters in Cinema in Chicago, who questioned, was like, where are you in this movie? And I was like, what? I am Black masculinity. Like this, that is me in the movie. But even though it was following an elder Black man in his community, whereas Girl highlights a young 10-year-old girl. And I also see myself in that young girl who is navigating sexual violence and incest while being isolated and still have questions about her gender as she's spending the weekend at her father's house, who he wakes up with his eyes like glued shut with mucus. And it's a short film, so I can't fully unpack all that I've planted in that film. But in my mind, he's suffering from AIDS and doesn't know his ailment. And his way of, I guess, remedying or alleviating the pain is cigarettes and the little bit of hot dogs that he sends his daughter off to the store. But that moment of her being outside is her agency. And when she experiences sexual violence, another thing in my work is not recreating the spectacle of the violence, but more so unpacking how these incidents and these acts of violence take place. And so in making Girl, I had to be very intentional of like, I don't want to see a grown man and a kid in an intimate space, but I do want to have a conversation about incest and sexual violence in ways that we don't, even though these acts are so normal in many people's worlds. And in making that film, I knew that I didn't want to have them in the same bed. I wanted the camera to be violating the child and the father violating the camera, and making that possible, and using the power of cinema to create meaning without putting harm back onto Black bodies. And so my next film that I made after that, Drip Like Coffee, is something that I see as more reflective of who I am. We have young Black queer women exploring their desire. And it's something that I can't find on television anywhere. You all know any films or shows that highlight two young working class Black women desiring each other while navigating heterosexual relationships as well? No, but is that the experience of most people, like, who are grappling with their sexuality and decolonizing their minds and their bodies? I think so. And it's something that I want to continue to explore in my work, thinking about the Dee Rees, the Cheryl Dunye's, the Kathleen Collins, the Julie Dashes. Black women filmmakers only get to make like one feature film, and that's it. And I'm about to make my first feature. And so going into this process, like, I want to make sure that I'm making the second film for Julie Dash, making the third film for Kathleen Collins, and all of the women who didn't necessarily have the resources to continue making work. Like right now we're in a digital era. I can make a film on my phone, whereas Julie Dash or Barbara McCall had to make sure they got 16mm film stock, like, donated to them or purchased, or funds to get that, or a camera. And so, yeah, I think not even just in my work, even in the classrooms, like, my students see me and they're like, whoa, you look like me and you sound like me too. What's going on? That's a part of my work too, decolonizing classrooms. I didn't have a Black woman professor that I could go to and cry in her office. Not that I encourage it, because it's a lot of labor on myself as well, but I understand the significance of my body in these spaces, not just on screen, but also in the classroom. Sorry for that long-winded response.
It was excellent. You went through them each so beautifully and clearly. Yeah, I mean, in sort of speaking to decolonizing, that can take us to the film that you and Kelly worked on, right? So when we're talking about decolonizing the canon, right? So you've mentioned women filmmakers. Kathleen Collins, one film, Julie Dash, one film. It's you know, that's such a statistic that when you hear that, you're just like, what? How is that even possible? But then, you know, going into the world of opera, Kelly, and you all made a film together with other collaborators that essentially is looking at the operatic canon, and storytelling, but also tying that into with African American spirituals. So there's this like lineage that you guys are starting to shape with the voice, with the sounds, but also with the bodies that are in the film. So I wonder if maybe Kelly, you can sort of talk about how you guys got to that place of the film, from the sort of the history of this piece, and then how you got to, I don't know if that's a lot to ask you to do, but maybe you could speak to that.
I see Anaiis chuckling because I would have to give all of that to Anaiis. I mean, we were so fortunate to be in her capable hands. She was there. She was looking into the camera. She was looking at me. She was communicating with me. She was telling me, it's fine. We need to do this. We need to do that. She was so patient because, as you know, what we're used to doing is on a stage, and you rarely have a camera that close to you. I mean, Anaiis did everything from bringing a little Bluetooth speaker so I could hear my music. I mean, you know, and then you've got New Yorkers walking by, and, you know, you're just in the real world filming this thing. And I can only speak for myself. I had no idea what Breathing Free was going to look like. I knew we were doing a music video. That's kind of how it was described to me. And I have seen other opera music videos, and that was all I had to go on. And I know that, you know, Heartbeat is involved in doing things that are more progressive. So I figured, you know, they were going to have a progressive lens on this, and that they had someone very capable in Anaiis putting this film together. And when we saw it and saw how she incorporated dance, modern dance, with Black bodies moving to our classical music, I mean, it was just the most fascinating thing I've ever seen. And to be involved in that was such an honor, because it's kind of all the things, you know, all the things on my Spotify list just put on film, you know, and things that I don't get the luxury to do. I was able to see through other collaborators who were just so talented in their field. So the question of how it came together, I need to pass to Anaiis, but I can say, as a participant, I was incredibly grateful and loved being a part of this project. And I can't wait for this audience to see it, because it really is a tremendous film.
Agreed. I had the most magical time working with Kelly. I only met Kelly in person on the days that we were filming, and she was trooping it out. And I think what was really exciting for me in approaching this whole experience was the opportunity to work with 3 Black opera singers. I didn't know one, and I got to meet 3 in one moment and put them all in the same space and time, even though that they were dispersed through New York, LA, and Chicago. So like trying to create one universal world where we all exist and have citizenship was a goal of the film. And it was just magical. One of my favorite songs that because I spent a lot of time working on this project, and in filmmaking, we have time to plan each and every shot. With theater film, there's limited time, and lots of folks who are involved in the movement, the arrangement of music. As we were filming this, Kelly was still recording music for this project. So everything was works in process, and just trying to fill the gaps with what we are able to accomplish in a limited time with limited resources during a pandemic. But one of my favorite pieces from the repertoire is Motherless Child. One, it just speaks and sings to my soul, but just thinking about what it is to be a motherless child on both ends, as the child and also the mother. And I feel like Kelly is the anchor for me in that piece and how I edit it together. Like, she's the mother, but longing for her children. And then the children are longing for her through dance and movement. And it's done in this very abstract, time-based media style where all the performers were recorded on their cell phones. And I guess the inspiration for the visual album, coincidentally, because I'm coming into this without any opera background, no training in operatics at all. This was my first encounter, and I'm so happy I was so naive and unaware of certain things because I was able to approach it with a different perspective and aesthetic. I'm coming from a cinema background, and I know how to speak to my audience with moving images. And to now be introduced to a new audience or bring two audiences together is all really exciting. How do we make this work legible for Black audiences just as much as we make it legible for the white audiences that are familiar with opera? And so what we produced was something just really magical and beautiful. And I hope that it just lives on, where Black people are able to claim opera in ways that we weren't before. Like, to hear Kelly say, there were dancers singing to our Black opera is just like magical, because it's true. Like, we possess these lyrics, the tones, the meaning, the message. And I think Breathing Free is successful in illustrating that.
What you've just said made me think about how your work now is changed for having worked in these other mediums, right? So Kelly, how does your performance staged opera work for you? How has it changed now that you've done the film version? And like, in flip side, Anaiis, how has your film work maybe shifted now that you've like gone into this opera world and sort of working with these bodies in this way? I'm just curious to hear if there was any takeaways.
I'll speak to that a little bit. One thing that working on Breathing Free has helped me understand, which is something that I feel like I've heard my whole life, but it's this understanding of just being who you are through whatever your art is. And especially in something like classical music, there are hundreds of years of things that I can go through in my head that I've heard over and over again by countless singers and staged productions that I've seen. And you can't help but think, I want to sound like this. I want to move like that. I want to portray this character like this. And the thing that I'm understanding is that what I am finding the most interesting is just looking through the lens of the artist to the character. What is that person bringing to this interpretation of the character that I haven't seen before? And I think it's helping me understand that I need to maybe trust myself a little bit more, stop listening to so many of the other voices that I've heard and say, what am I thinking of this? And allowing myself to bring that. And even if it's not this aesthetic that I believe opera is supposed to be, I don't necessarily want to hear that all the time. I want to hear what someone new thinks of this. And I'm getting the permission to do that more through works like Breathing Free. And I'm starting to put it into the things that I've been singing for years and years and years. And it's really making this art form new for me in exciting ways. And I'm looking at it differently, and I'm loving it in a way I haven't for a very long time. So yeah, I think that's my takeaway.
Back to inspiration. I love that. Yeah. A cracking open. Yeah.
Such a great question and response. I'm coming from an off-Broadway background. So like I was in Harlem throwing on community shows with the Mama Foundation, Mama I Want to Sing, or We Are, and putting on gospel, using gospel as a theatrical performance, and a way that I had a complicated relationship to church, but like was surrounded by teenagers who would just come in from all five boroughs and like sing out their souls, where you have goosebumps on your arms, and like the neighborhood showing up and being moved as they leave the Dempsey Theater on 127th Street, like just feeling electrified by the music that we put on in Harlem. And so to then move into film and then go back into live performance and get to bring these two worlds together was all really exciting. I know at the top of the year of last year, I was able to like make visuals for Jill Scott's tour. And so to think that there were going to be moving images behind a live music composed kind of production, I was like, oh, this is like silent film or silent cinema. Then to be, I guess, introduced to Breathing Free, I was like, okay, how can I explore, again, music? Music keeps coming up in these very fascinating ways. And I think my desire when I first was interested in film was like to be a music video director. But then I was told that there's no funding for that anymore. But knowing that I wanted to tell stories with images. And so with Breathing Free, I was able to, I guess, sit with dance and movement a bit more and listen to the bodies as they're going into as I'm editing them together to the music as well. But then also like, where will music come up for me again in my film work? Because the first two films that I described earlier, Breathless and Girl, there is no music there. And so the next film, like in my lifetime, I want Kelly to sing a score for one of my movies in my world. But now thinking about it, oh, I need a Black composer. I need a Black woman singing these lyrics that also are in conversation with the visuals, and go further on that. But I need to think more deeply and make it intentional. So Kelly, before I pitch to you, I need to get my stuff together. But that's the goal, to just continue working with opera. Like there's a Black woman singing opera in New York City, and I got to work with her. And I want to see her again and again and again, not just in my work, but everywhere. I'm excited to go to my first opera show in person when Kelly's on stage.
That's amazing. Yes. Bryöna, I'm curious to see you've gotten a chance now to hear everybody, and we started with your work, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts as you've heard everyone talk about their work, and you haven't seen it yet, but I'm just curious if there's any questions coming up for you. Yeah. Questions, thoughts, responses?
I mean, I'm really excited to hear about, I love like the idea of community that the two of you have worked together. That's really inspiring. And just, I love how music and images and just all of these things really go in hand. So I'm interested really in your process as a filmmaker, like what motivates you, what pushes you to create? Because it's like, it's easy to like dream and have these ideas and have visuals in your mind, but like what pushes you to like make it real?
I think making a film is one of the hardest things to ever do in life. Like people don't complete films. People don't get to make films over. So as I mentioned, all of those Black women who didn't get a second film, this is what inspires me. The lack of representation of Black women voices is another thing that inspires me. That roller skating museum also is an inspiration. Like I'm like, I want to see visuals for that. And the fact that it's like this multimodal form of navigating the history of roller skating is really incredible. So it's like not just films. Like I can't go to the movie theaters and be like, I was so inspired by that. I'm trying to think of the movies that are out right now, and they're all very white. Spider-Man movie. I'm so inspired. There was so many Black women in there doing really badass things. There weren't any. So I'm just kind of not only thinking about cinema and what is available to me, but you are inspiring. Your film is inspiring. The youth, the next generation of filmmakers are really inspiring and have so much to say. And then the past, like the LA Rebellion filmmakers who were coming out of UCLA in the 1960s and 70s has been the activist filmmaking model for me. Like, that's why I make films, because Halle Garima, Barbie McCall, Xanabu Irene Davis, Iverson White, Billy Woodbury, Charles Burnett, all of those filmmakers and that collective, Jacqueline Frazier, they're the reasons why I feel so inspired to make films. And they made powerful films as student makers. Like, to be a student is like the rawest, most illest space to be a filmmaker. And so to be a professor and then show your work to students and they're like, oh, that's not that bad. I'm like, that's my audience there. They're the most critical viewers out there in the world, and want to let you know that your work isn't anything. But my students are like, oh, that was actually a fire film. It's like, all right, cool. I'm glad you enjoyed it. But yeah, the youth, the next generation of filmmakers and the past filmmakers, and a lot of my peers who are making films now and playing with the conventions of storytelling, not just going in the act 1, act 2, act 3, but just telling the stories that speak to their souls, like your work does so beautifully.
I really love what you just said, Anaiis, because I feel like our process is sort of similar, and I feel like there might be an opportunity for us to work together. The first kind of big exhibition that I'm planning, I've actually started it, is called Neo Disco Bodies on Wheels, which is body painting times roller skating, a celebration of Black body positivity, and something I coined as disco futurism. And so the idea, the social justice aspect, is to create a counter image to the assault, and what someone even said as trauma porn, that the news cycles love to reduce us to victims, and that our bodies are constantly murdered, beaten, traumatized, hurt, violated. And that's sort of the norm that comes with Blackness, especially womanness. And so this project of these roller skaters, which is already kind of magical to watch someone roller skate, because everyone has their own way that their bodies will move on these wheels. And then putting this additional layer of body painting, which transforms the body, almost it's a painted on costume in a way, and bringing these aesthetics from the disco era and pushing them, into the future, mixing futurism with them. I've already done 2 sessions, and I think this work, to me, is, I'm biased, but I do think this work is really beautiful and really dynamic. And the nature of these, my approach is the layering. Similar to you, is to work with, I'm an artist, and I'm working with skaters to highlight their talent, and then bring a filmmaker, and then bring in a musician, so that at the end you have this composition that is just a feast, for the senses, So as much as it's uplifting, it's also so sensory and so rich, that it just has its place. It can stand alone on that without the premise of its, of its social purpose. And it's funny, you're a professor at Smith. I'm an Amherst College alum. So, we were in that five college consortium, and that's an interesting space to be in, just in the Valley, in Western Massachusetts, where, African-American women are 5%, it's very small. So you very much have to stand your ground to make your presence felt.
That's why I moved. I moved from Northampton. I'm in Brooklyn. I couldn't do it.
You're not Professor at Smith anymore?
No, I'm a professor at Smith, just working remotely. And this next year, I'll be on a fellowship at Amherst College to make a film. So I will still be remote. But I loved everything that you just shared. And yes, please, if you have any events happening in New York City, let me know. I think what you described is so important, especially about trauma porn. It's something that I think people subconsciously don't know that they're so intrigued by and fascinated with, that when it comes up in the work, it's always shocking to have to explain to people that it's trauma porn that we're kind of exploring. Even with Breathing Free, there's an incarcerated man, and I was instructed as the editor from the heads of this project to leave a long take of this Black man in prison. And I was like, well, what's the audience supposed to gain from that? Like, no, I need to see him out of that space. I need to see that he has agency, not just that. Like, what is the viewer supposed to really gain from seeing this man 60 seconds zip tied together in darkness? And it's like, can we just get a glimpse of it and then continue moving with the images? And then that's when we bring in Kelly's character and bringing visuals of this character Free running towards Kelly's character. But again, just having to educate groups of people who mean well. I absolutely think Heartbeat Opera is all for uplifting voices of color and exploring and subverting conventional classical music. But still, unconscious bias and stuff can come up and you're not aware of it. And so in my effort as a filmmaker is to be absolutely critical of how Black women are looking. Is Kelly's hair gonna be, Kelly, you don't know how many conversations I had about if we were gonna be supported. For all of the actors though, because it's a thing that people want to work with but don't consider, like Black hair. And that's a huge part of the Black woman's body. Like you can't have an actress and not consider doing something or supporting her with hair or makeup. Like you want these beautiful Black people to look beautiful on camera. That requires a natural look, like I don't know. I just think these are things that are overlooked and people just want Black bodies and not consider, how do we illuminate these Black bodies? How do we light these Black bodies? How do we be intentional? Like to hear Kelly have a moment as a actor working with me that she felt seen and she felt heard, like as one of the few women working on this very male dominant project, was important. That Kelly at any moment can see me and I will stop this whole thing. I don't care about any production. I'm not here for that unless you are okay. And so whether what you saw in front of the camera was a fight was also happening behind the scenes, because I care about how Black bodies are depicted and making sure that we are visualized in the best light possible. But Jocelyn, I want to continue touching base on the roller skating museum. And thinking, sorry, something else you said about the glow in the dark on the skin, like thinking about bodies as maps and then that remapping and then reimagining of a cultural space with the DJ who's playing music at the roller rink, or you said a musician, and then like maker. Yeah, there's just so many things, exciting things that starting to circulate in my mind.
Definitely.
Yes, and highlighting the spaces for Black joy. I think that we can go back historically, and I'm always, you can look back historically through film, through TV, you go back and you're like, folks were dancing, folks were laughing, folks were like, they were coming together in community. There's always joy despite, and choosing to highlight that, choosing to live in that, choosing to make space for that. I'm applauding all of you in this room for making beauty and holding space for joy and holding space for each other and for community. Is there anything anyone wants to say before we're just about 2 minutes before we have to wrap? So I just wanted to.
Can we talk about Saturday so people know to come out?
Go for it.
Well, we have FREEFEST in person. So this whole wonderful presentations all week long culminate into an amazing festival this Saturday at Domino Park, free and open to the public, starting at 4 p.m. I don't know the whole lineup, so maybe someone else can jump in, but the African American Roller Skate Museum will be there, and I've invited skaters to come out. So I know there's going to be DJs and awards and a sunset with the film showing after. And Domino Park is so beautiful. It's on the water. You guys, come on, tell them what else is going to be happening, because I don't know all of it, but I know it's going to be a wonderful event.
Yeah, same. I'm Kelly and I will be screening Breathing Free at Domino Park. And like Jocelyn just said, it's such a beautiful location to come together and celebrate these really great projects. So we'll be out there, I guess, starting at 4, you said, and our screening begins around 8:30. So we'll be out there for a few hours. You should join us in Brooklyn, Williamsburg.
Yes, come. I'll be singing live at Domino Park. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you. And yeah, come out, please.
Wonderful. And for more information for those of you out there in the world, you go to flypaper.org/FREEFEST for more information. But I think you guys just did an awesome job of letting everybody know what's happening Saturday and not to miss it. It sounds amazing. Thank you all so much. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to Flypaper for holding space for us to have this conversation. It has been such an honor to get to meet each and every one of you. I look forward to following more of your work as we move forward. Bryöna, congratulations on your piece, and we definitely look forward to more work from you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Great to see you.
all.
Bye.